Hello, this is Eric Torres, and this is my project on assessing student learning. So as we go through the tutorial, I'm going to show you um, how I worked on the project of assessing student learning during our World War I unit, and I'll discuss the instructional decisions and measurement tools and pretty much my own reflections about this whole project as we go through it. So, for the first part of this, the instructional decisions, uh, some things that helped me make my instructional decisions as I was going through this unit were assessments. And the big things about assessments, I used formal and informal type of assessments. One of the formal assessments I used were quizzes. I did provide my students with uh, vocab quizzes and content quizzes to help gauge their learning. Another type of quiz I used were informal quizzes. So we would play games like Flip Quiz, which is kind of like a online version of Jeopardy, and we also did we also did flip quizzes. We also did other online games to help with content and vocab, and we also did class activities such as reflection chains, which I'll go over that a little bit later. Some of my core instructions for the core instruction part, I I figured out how to differentiate some lessons because I had some students that were very successful with the content and needed a little bit more challenging work. So, one in particular activity we did was called a home front, and we learned about the home front during World War One, what kind of things were going on, what kind of programs, what people did to help motivate other Americans to get more involved in the war effort. And so with that, I had a regular assignment and I had a more enriched assignment that was a little bit more difficult for those who were needing that extra challenge and that could handle it. For my measurement tools, I used quite a bit. One really good website I used was called Socrative. It is a website and it is a measurement type of tool where you can quiz students and gauge their learning. And Socrative also provides you data on the questions that students missed and like the percentages, and you can see on what questions or what type of questions you might need to review in the future, which I'll show you guys a sample of that here in just a moment. Flip Quiz was another really good measurement tool, although it wasn't as formal as Socrative. But with Flip Quiz, you can use it as a game to kind of see what questions students may need to work on, what content area students may need to work on as you go around and play a game with it. Reflection chains, as you can see down there at the bottom, reflection chains was pretty much just a review type of activity I did with the students. They could pretty much jot down a kind of like a pieces of information from their notes on one chain to create, I'm sorry, on one link of the paper chain, and their goal was to make the longest paper chain in order to earn a reward, which in this case was extra credit. But the best measurement tool was Socrative. It gave me all the data and information I needed to really help guide my instructional strategies. So right here is a sample of student work. As you can see, the green means the student got the answer right. I'm sorry, got the question right, and the red represents that the students got the question wrong. There was an issue, however, with some of these questions. Two, as you can see, where they're both all red, that is actually kind of like a website issue because uh, if you type in the answer one way and students type in the same answer but with like maybe without the word the, or they misspelled it but you know what they're talking about, it's going to count it wrong. And so we came across that issue as we were doing this. So some of these answers, some of these questions were correct. However, due to technicalities with the website, it shows up that the student missed it. But I had to kind of personally kind of go through and see, okay, such and such knew what that was, and so forth. But still, it really did provide some really good feedback as to what students did not understand, especially when it came to content. So when it actually came down to the test part or the testing of the students, like the very last summative test, um, my students, they averaged, although I do not have a sample of it, but my students averaged about 25 to 30 points out of 50. So when I went through the tests, I looked and I seen, okay, where were the students not at their strongest? And I realized it was vocabulary. Vocabulary was it was a weak point for all the students. And as I reflected on that, I realized I probably did not really hit vocab like I needed to hit it, especially when I'm testing over it. I mean, we reviewed it, but I did not stress it like I stressed the content. I was too focused on the content, but not on the vocab. So what I did was is I went ahead and I allowed students to take the test home and correct answers, so that way they could get a higher score. And several students took this opportunity, went home, corrected the answers to their best ability, brought it back, and at that point, I saw a big jump. A lot of students got into the 40s range, and I had a couple get 100% on the test. So for the reflections, I reflected on this whole process of assessing student learning, and I got to thinking, okay, so what worked for the kids, what did not work? What I did realize worked really, really well was in-class reviews. I did provide all students with a take-home quiz, just because our school schedule this particular week was really messed up. We had a lot of off and on days. We were out of school, in school, so I gave students a take-home quiz to fill out and bring back so they could use it on the test. But I realized almost none of the students took advantage of this, which I found interesting. And they did not do the take-home quiz, and they didn't use it on their test. So I found in-class reviews more effective than providing a practice test to take home. What interventions were applied? We did a lot of study in independent groups, or independent and group study groups. We highlighted our Cornell notes. We circled words that would be very important, especially the vocab words. And we did this very frequently. And I feel like that was pretty good. That was effective for students to help remember the content. And that's something I am definitely going to apply in the future. And as it says right there in future lessons, we are going to continue reviewing the Cornell notes effectively, highlighting important information, circling important words to know. And we are going to continue, well, what I am going to do now is really hone in on vocab. I feel like I didn't do that very well in the last unit. So on this unit, review those vocab words periodically so that way students can remember it, and review the content by highlighting, going through notes, playing games to make sure that those students are retaining information from the content. So that's pretty much my PowerPoint on assessing student learning. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the project. I feel like I've grown as a reflective teacher since this project started, and I really do value the skills that come with this. I plan to implement them in the future. So, thank you. Have a great day.